Isabel Morin. I just listened to your Sensibly Speaking podcast on Scientology training. I believe it was Jenna Miscavige Hill who said that the fastidiousness of study tech ruined her pleasure of reading for life. I certainly can imagine why. Referring to dictionaries for definitions of words is essential, but the understanding of words can also come from inference and context of a sentence. That is also a valuable skill to develop, but seems completely neglected in Scientology training. My question is, do you think this neglect affects Scientologists' abilities of conceptual and figurative thought? Ultimately, perhaps, critical thought? Hey, thanks for the question, Isabel. It's a good point you were making there. As far as critical thought or how Scientologists think, it's interesting because when you clear a word according to the way that I described, when you define it and make up sentences, do all the stuff that you're supposed to do, Hubbard says you're supposed to have a full conceptual understanding, quote unquote, of that word. Hubbard talked about thinking in concepts rather than thinking in words or pictures. And he thought that that was a more ideal state of thinking and being, is that people wouldn't have to think slowly and literally, is how he thought about it when you were thinking in pictures or words, like actually thinking the words or seeing the words, presented before you and when you in the mental theater of your mind. So Hubbard ran into all of this kind of thinking when he was, doing Dianetics on people back in the 50s. I mean, there was a real well of research data there. It's just that it was so not used for research. But there really was a fantastic, well of information there. And from that, Hubbard drew some conclusions that people think pretty oddly in a number of ways. And, in some ways he's right. Hubbard was one of the people thinking pretty oddly. So conceptual thinking became the sort of ne plus ultra for him of how to go about thinking and learning things. So that's what Scientologists, the reason I'm talking about all this is because that's what Scientologists think about their thinking, is they think that because they're applying this word clearing and the other pieces of study technology to how they learn things, they're not only learning it faster and easier than the rest of the world, maybe not easier all the time because of all the time in the dictionaries and the demo kits and all the rest of it. So really not easier, but after you get into the groove of it and get going, you actually do pick up the pace. And after clearing all these words over and over and over again, I have to say there's no disadvantage to doing that. There is only good that comes from being a more literate person. I can't think of any damaging repercussions of that. But again, like I mentioned in the podcast, Scientology always takes things to 11. So any benefit is crushed by all the authoritarian nonsense. But if you take all that away and you just use dictionaries and look up words and clear them up and really make sure you understand what you're reading, there's nothing, like I said, there's nothing really wrong with that. Scientologists, though, can be fooled by this technology. They can think, they can become arrogant, or they can become get into this frame of mind where this is all they need in order to learn something. And there are cases where these are not the adequate tools to get the job done. You could have other situations coming up that could impinge on or prevent learning. Tom Cruise comes in to Scientology and he claims he's dyslexic. I don't know if he technically was or not. He says he was, and that by applying study tech, so magically he could read well again. Well, good for Tom Cruise. And if that's all true, then great. But that's not how you cure dyslexia. So, if there were, because if that was all there was needed to do it, then we wouldn't have dyslexia anymore because everybody who had it would just be clearing up their words, right? So that is a real learning problem. There are other mental issues that people have, or psychological or physical issues that prevent a person from being able to inflow information, duplicate it, understand it, and repeat it back. And study tech is not anywhere close to sufficient as a body of tools, as a toolkit to use to overcome that. So this arrogance on the part of Scientologists about their ability to learn and study can become problematic when you're trying to teach them something new that they think they already know. I mean, all the things that you run into with anybody in any situation anyway, right? It's just that you'll probably have the chances of those kind of problems coming up or being a barrier to teaching a Scientologist something are greater than the rest of the population because of that presumed knowledge that they have and certainty that that's all that they need. That's the thing that actually prevents them from learning new stuff, is this absolute certainty that L. Ron Hubbard had all the answers and no one else can teach them anything other than Hubbard. So there you go.